Okay, hello. Can you see my terminal now?
Yep.
All right. So I just set up pro as an alias for provision. Pro status, st, or just use the whole word or just a couple letters. Tells you this thing. I've got a config folder here with something already in it because I did a provision save, but we want to make our contexts. You don't need to specify. You can specify all these options on the command line. So all of the options get passed from the site or platform or server contexts into this provision save command, just like in provision save for Drush. But if you don't specify them, it's interactive. So you can type in, with Symfony Console, you can type in either the number that it's offering or press up and down on the keyboard. It'll actually scroll through the items, or type in just a letter. It'll do autocomplete. These are passed from the method options documentation. I'm still figuring out what we need and what we don't need. I don't have it loading default, so right now for demo, I have to type in every one. Once you got it, it says, okay, here's the properties. Do you want us to save it to this YAML file? I hit yes, and it says, boom, there it is, saved to that YAML file. And then when I do provision status, it shows all the contexts. So server master is there, so I can do provision status server master. And boom, there's all the properties I just entered, loaded from the YAML file. Not just loaded from the YAML file, but loaded into a Symfony config object that validates the YAML file with all of these options. Servers don't have that much. So let's do another one. Provision save, platform, hostmaster. It's a platform, root. I'm gonna just do, this is just for demo. I don't have it actually validating a site, so it doesn't really matter yet. Server, right now, I'm gonna make sure it's correct, but I'm gonna show you how I have it validating this in a minute. Or no, server is generic. I forgot that doesn't actually do anything with it. So this would be the make file. Doesn't matter. So, okay, web server. I'm in the middle of making the context properties that relate to other contexts a special property. So I can go in. It doesn't use that to ask interactively yet. So that's what I'm going to work on. But if I load up this, I put in web server. I've removed web server from the context options without fully testing this thing out yet. So server master. It's actually going to fail too, I think, because I just added validation. So I do provision status. It checks. There's an unrecognized option web server under server. Oh yeah, I edited the wrong thing. Okay, so notice that. You can't even add an extra property without our code saying it's allowed, right? So I edited the wrong file. I'm editing the server node. Server nodes don't have the property web server, right? So it detected that and told me add bad config. So if I get rid of that, I'll get a different error, I think. No, not yet. I can edit this, the platform. Oh, it didn't save it. Didn't save it because I had it wrong. Okay, I can fix this real quick. Watch. Under platform context, you guys can see my PHP storm. I'll assume that's a yes.
Yep.
Cool. It uses this option documentation to generate those lists of properties. I removed web server because I'm using a different way to add that down here that validates it to make sure the context is actually a server and actually provides the web server. So let me just remove that so we can save a platform node. I think this should be fine. Save platform hostmaster, platform, localhost, doesn't matter. Oops, I set it as a server. Platform. So web server, I'm gonna make sure it matches the name of an actual server, but I think this is actually gonna fail because it's looking for the HTTP service and I haven't added that yet. Yep. good time to show the services. We have the server, right? Server master, but there's no services attached yet. So I do pro services, server master. By default, it just lists what's available, but if I do add, it looks up all the classes. So there's these service classes, and it looks up any of the classes that are in the, I think in the namespace, or that extend, I forget exactly what the logic I used, but I was able to use the command discovery class that Drush uses and Robo uses to look up these classes for HTTP and DB. And so it's loading it straight from this stuff to give me the option. So I can say, yes, server master, I want to load the HTTP server. Which service type? Apache or Nginx. I say A, 80, web group, www data. These are all, again, you just have to put in dummy values for now. And so now that I did that, service saved to context, I can do provision status, and then boom. So I have a display here for services, all the services. And so this is, so then we can do, maybe get this platform going. Yeah, that's because. Let me comment this out for now. I did this on an existing config, so it's like trying to save it. And I just did it this morning. Okay, so now it's going to save this. So I've got this saved as a scalar value, but now if I uncomment this code, it'll look at that value and check to see that if it's a context. There's this awesome little class here called config definition that allows us to basically set our own validator. Instead of scalar or Boolean or array, we check to see if it's actually a context. And so now it's not going to do anything because it's fine. But if I change web server to a server that doesn't exist, let me load up the config file here so you can see what it looks like. So here's the platform. Web server, server master 2, for example. And I run config status, it'll say, bang, no context found with server master 2. If I change it to, if I go to server master 2 and I remove the database, the HTTP service, because it's required, and I'll show you how I do that in a second. But say we remove the web service from server master, say it's a database server, it should say, bang, service HTTP does not exist in the specified context server master. So it's validating that it's the right type even. Like, for example, I can, if I change it to itself or to a wrong context, it'll say, actually, it's I can't do that because it'll do recursion. But if I specified like a site node for web server, it'll say it's the incorrect type. So it validates along those lines as well. Okay, so now that we have that, we can add. Actually, I think I'm gonna have to do the same little hack for the site node before I get it in. Postmaster. It's a save postmaster site local host language. Again, I just copied and pasted since these aren't actually implemented yet, so it doesn't really matter. Profile postmaster aliases, same thing. So I have to look and figure out how to prepare for. For example, I'll just say an example. If I do this on the command line, it'll just skip it, and because it already knows. Okay, boom. But I try to be verbose about it. So we already know that you specified in the command line, so it's using that option. Oh yeah, I also have to load, uncomment these two. That's gonna, yeah. So look, this is just a test of the validation. Pro status, host master. Error with the configuration, unrecognized option, web server, right? Because it needs to be DB server. Oh, I got to put back the uncomment this, the recomment, and now it'll do the validation on the types. Context specified must be type platform, right? So I put server master instead of platform. Great. It won't let me, like, we'll figure out how through the console it won't let you do it. We'll figure out a way to block it. Platform. I think it's going to fail for the DB server because we did not add the DB service. So services add, server master, add, DB, MySQL, and then it's the same. It's like you would expect the properties for that. Root, and localhost, host, sure, false. Okay, server saved context. You can see, boom, another service has been added. Pro status host master. Boom. So now it validates because server master was selected as DB server, and now server master has database. So now that we have all of those things in place and everything's valid, we have the verify command. Which, boom. So I've already got it writing the Apache config template. Where did I? Oh yeah, it's added in the HTTP service server configuration. It's very similar to the Aegir config files. I'm renaming it to configuration to avoid confusion because ours is configuration for the server. Symfony config is what's used for across the board config for Drupal 8 and all the rest. But it's doing it. Server master, Apache conf, passing the values from all the way up to users, through that. Let's do the others. Provision V platform. Oh yeah, watch Pro V. Oh, that's right. In my other branch that I have a branch where it gives you the options, so you can select the context from a list as well. So that's nice without having to know what it is, what the platforms are. Oops, duh. Yeah. I thought I had, yeah. Again, the other branch has a little bit more, is a little bit further along, but that's where I'm at.
That's pretty good so far. That's definitely progress. Oh yeah, great work.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's all just like shuffling metadata around and building these relationships. I'm learning a lot more even about the context class like the config stuff, like being able to. It's just so much cleaner to do things.
Well, it's object-oriented, right? So that helps.
It's what?
It's object-oriented, so that helps.
Yeah. Just fully. It's great. Yeah, I mean it's all pretty self-explanatory stuff. Even I don't even know where to jump in, but give me more feedback. I don't know. We need to simplify some things. I'm trying to find where I load up the configs so you can see how that works. Has anybody got any more comments or?
Well, I mean, so you have it writing an Apache config file at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So that's just rendering a template like we normally do at this point.
Yep. It's even loading. I just loaded server TPL.
Right.
So, just to keep it simple, obviously it would be nice to switch to Twig or something like that, but right now it's not necessary.
Sure. So, have you hooked this up to the front end at this point?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I've got a branch in hosting module that changes the hosting task, the command that runs. So it actually is just in this one spot instead of it's a provision backend invoke or something for Drush provision dash command. And so I changed that to be like, I don't have it open, but so if we pretty much build that right there and put the options there, I mean, that's where I'm thinking the interface will be the same. Just pass it through. The other thing.
So the intention now, though, is to save the variables to a task, to the task table still, and just pick that up on the back end.
Well, right now it's just a replacement for provision save, provision verify, right? So the idea, I guess, would be like provision save should happen at the beginning of most tasks. If there's any changes to the this context data, it should save that to the file, to the config file, that's what it is now instead of Drush alias. And I think that might be better than like this confusing merger of options, task arguments to the command line options, or maybe it could be. I mean, it could be both, right? Because sometimes you're running the command on the context, but you want to send different options through. I don't know. I haven't really gotten that far out yet.
Okay.
But basically, because this is all the same architecture as like the new Drush 9, which has the ability to like find and load extra command files. So like one of the big pieces is to figure out how do we keep it extensible, because people are writing extra things, and now with Drush it's easy to write these extra hooks with traditional hooks. But we want to let the community still be able to write a file that reacts to verify server or whatever. So I don't know. I've just been following what Drush is doing and the robo consolidation projects. The annotated command has this class that finds all the files, but there's a lot. I'm just chipping away at trying to get to the writing virtual hosts and restarting Apache, and then step by step from there.
Okay. Certainly looking promising.
Yeah, thanks. So what I'm really thinking, though, since this is like the config validation needs to happen, whether it's in the CLI or in the Drupal 8 stuff that you're working on, like you should be able to require provision as a package because it is on Packagist to just require Aegir/provision, and maybe just use that directly, like to map, to load in. It's like packages or something. Packages, yeah. Because like so much of the logic is, this is your web server. Does it actually have database? Is the name correct? All of that stuff is here now that I have it built into wired up through the config classes. You might be able to just leverage this directly and like pass whatever things come through the forms or entity storage if you want in the front end. Just pass it directly to these configs, because the Symfony config is what's at the bottom of the Drupal config management. So it's all using the same classes from Symfony. Those files could just be saved somewhere else, right? I could configure my local provision to point at the Drupal 8 file storage for the config directly, right? So
at this point, there isn't any backend file storage going on.
Right, you're just using the entity, or what? Right.
Just using the database. The command line, as far as I see it, for this would actually just be Symfony commands, right? Like that. We just assume the database is there at this point for that, and we can feed that, YAML config files if we want to have, a simple way to deploy things in an automated fashion. But at this point, the front end is just gathering and saving the data, right? And that's essentially what it does. And then it dispatches to, at this point, Ansible on the back end to actually just consume those variables and do something with it.
Right.
And so the idea is to not have the replication of data, because that's always been sort of, we have the hosting import and stuff to try to get resync the front end with changes on the back end. And, there's a lot more complexity that comes with that. So I think at this point, the idea is just, we can, if we implement a CLI, we can run it headless in a sense, but we still have a database there with, the logic of how the fields, aggregate together into, in this case, tasks and operations is the model that I've been working on. So it's a very different implementation for it. But the idea in this case is actually to not build in any assumptions about the what kind of application we're running or anything of that nature, right? And to push all of that out to the edges of basically the tasks and the Ansible roles on the back end that consume the fields in those tasks with fieldable entities. And so the idea is to make it as simple as possible to implement small pieces and then build those together, rather than try to assume a lot of in-depth knowledge about the kind of thing that we're managing. Right. So I don't know how far that'll get us, but it's actually getting pretty close to having something something functional from a starting point in terms of actually implementing some of the various operations, right? So things like deploying a platform, installing a site, and so forth. To what extent we can then, maintain that context or look it up in some fashion, I'm not entirely sure what we're going to need yet. So that's one of the next steps in the coming week or two. But yeah, so it's a very different way of doing things. So I don't know that the config validation at this point is going to help, because I think we'll probably implement something like that at some point. But the assumption at this point is that we're not going to be saving that data somewhere separately, right?
Right, but I'm saying we don't have to. It could be the whatever is in the database that needs to be there, fine. But like that can, instead of saving it as entities to the database traditionally, we can just save it to config, like Drupal config, which is saved in YAML files exactly as it is via the command line. And that can be saved, doesn't need to be saved in a server-wide folder. It can be actually saved right in the Drupal site path or wherever is appropriate. And then the provision CLI can read that from that path directly. Right? So if we use this, if we use create configuration classes for each of the contexts that have all the validation built in, you can use the same exact code for validating it on the front end, and then writing it to the files, and then the command line can read those same files and run the same classes to validate it, as opposed to storing everything in Drupal fields.
Right.
Like you could still associate the context, the provision context class with like an entity in the database, so you can have fields and all that added on as an add-on. But if we kept the context, like these context classes, the same, like site contexts, the ones I'm creating here, you could use those in the front end as well to like pipe the information into it, validate it, save it to config files, and also if you want, link it to an editable entity with other bells and whistles. But again, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's something that happens in the middle, because what you're building is so different. Right, but I envision that's how I envision a simplified kind of Drupal 8 module that includes this and uses this to input the basics and then validate and
so
save.
It doesn't need its own storage. I mean, in either case, you only have stuff stored in one place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't need this. Like the database is just an extra if people want nodes or something. Like we don't even need that. Like you could write an interface in Drupal 8 that it's configuration, right? So you'd have an admin style interface instead of nodes and editing and revisions. You would just create a add, remove, delete within specifically for these config units that we call contexts, and then maybe optionally link that to nodes or something. But I feel like wrapping an interface with another set of classes called Aegir/hosting package in Packagist to connect the provision contexts here with a UI, with the Forms API for Drupal, might be a different way to go as opposed to storing nodes and entities. And then the Drupal, wherever it stores its config files, becomes the canonical source of information.
So you're not going to miss your appointment, are you?
Nope. I'm going to leave in a minute here. I'm very, very close, thankfully. Real quick, I think I forgot that this part worked. Okay, so I was able to add a thing called service subscriptions. Instead, so when you look at a class like a site class context, it has a subscription to services that are available. And so I set in the services, or in the context class, I think I have required a method, or it's a different one. Somewhere I have a method that says required services. Right? And so I was able to say pro services, Postmaster add, which one do you need DB, which server, and then it looks up all of the servers that use DB and allows me to add it very easily. DB name, right? And this is where it generates the site specific stuff. So when I do status hostmaster, it shows you all the service subscriptions. Ooh, it must be doing something bad here. Yeah, I think it's loading too many contexts, I think. I'll have to check on that. But what you see is similar to this, where it says service subscription, DB, database user, database password, all that stuff gets stored. And it's all just getting piped into these YAML files. So yeah. All right, yeah, that's it. I'm gonna stop recording and then jump off. So
all right. Thanks for
to our viewers at home, thanks for watching. And
John, that was great.
I'll keep you guys posted, updated on more progress.